onboarding journey. Hi, my name is Trig Goldberg. I'm a sales engineer at OneSignal. And
I'm Sasha. I'm an enterprise CSM here at OneSignal. Been in MarTech for 6 years on the CDP side and the mobile marketing side.
So thanks for joining us. It's kind of an intimate crowd here, so we also can keep it interactive. We'll save questions to the end. And the agenda, first we're going to talk about the importance and impact of onboarding and retention. Then we'll talk about some best practices and some examples that we've seen in our professional experience. And then we'll give a demo of the OneSignal Journey product and kind of show you that in action. So, and towards the end also we'll have questions, so some Q&A here. Starting off, some quotes maybe you're already familiar with, right? Acquiring a new customer is 5 times as expensive as retaining an existing customer. And this one I think is kind of funny because a 5% increase in customer retention can increase profits 25 to 95%, which is kind of a broad range, right? So it's like, oh, you need to be doing it, but we don't really know how much. But I think everyone can assume, that's pretty valuable. Now, some more pain, kind of communicating the pain up front. 1 in 5 users will abandon your app after that, the first week of use. 60% chance the user will never return. And it becomes even more important when we're talking about Apple's app tracking transparency, which is whole fun that we're used to. And we can talk about little tactics too, because effectively that's really just saying, hey, don't track us. We're not going to get an IDFA. So that's making user acquisition more expensive, but you're still tracking information and getting users to onboard and log in, so you can personalize and segment according to all that. But that's the pain. That's the world we face. Now, quickly, just a little bit about OneSignal. If you're not familiar with us, basically we provide push, in-app, email, SMS, and orchestration across all those different channels. So all of your owned channels, right? So you can leverage those to engage and really drive your key metrics once you have acquired those users. Lots of notifications per day. We have pretty significant market share when it comes to web push and push in general, driven a lot by our freemium model. So people can sign up and install our app. It's very low friction to install the SDK and start messaging. But we also have a lot of great enterprise customers as well. And we're speaking here today from our experience of a lot of our customers and what they're doing. And one in particular, this was from Eat Street. So this was a great story, great example of how they leverage their own channels to drive retention and onboard customers. So for them, $8 around average CPA, right? So, which is, I don't know, it's probably going to only go up from there in the future, for being honest with ourselves. But they, leveraging OneSignal, they are able to retain customers at a fraction, right? So, a fraction of a penny there as far as your customer retention cost. But they had some really cool tactics, from personalized messages, segmenting based on users' behavior, based on the number of purchases, and they leveraged our Journeys product to do that. So, and the numbers speak for themselves as far as that goes. So on into some best practices, which I can take this, and then Sasha has some good things to talk about as well, because I feel like I'm talking too much at this point. But it all starts with empathy, which is pretty self-evident, but it's where is the user coming from, what's valuable to them, what are the intrinsic internal motivators that are going to drive them to sign up, and you meet the customer where they're at. And segments, right? If you leverage tools from OneSignal, right? When you segment and personalize messages based on where they're coming from, your engagement rate goes up 50%. That's pretty cool. And this is from our, we have a report, what's it called? The State of Messaging.
State of Mobile Messaging.
State of Mobile Messaging, which you can go to our website and give your personal information, email address, which maybe you can use a burner one. So, that's like a little tip, little hacker tip, so you don't have to give your email necessarily, right? And download that and get some more information. But also thinking about the users, right? This is pretty straightforward too. Notifications that use localization have higher engagement rate. I've heard of some though, sometimes for Spanish in particular, sometimes where English actually engages higher. So it's something that I'm trying to get on this theme of, we talked to a lot of people on the acquisition side and they're performance marketers. I also think people can do that a lot more on the engagement side. So your performance that practice is brought to your engagement side, and you want to keep learning and have that be a positive feedback loop. I think it's more important now because of the cost of acquisition and stuff like that. So I know I said I was talking too much, and now, Sasha, let's move on to the first one there.
I'll do some last notes on the empathy as well. One of the things I always like to stress to customers who are trying to figure out what they want to focus on during onboarding is to think about how important the space is that you're taking up for push notifications. This is the same screen where people are seeing their emails, getting text messages for loved ones. In order to show up on that phone and to, give your best game for what you're going to send them and show them. I think the more work you're doing on the back end to segment and show that you're listening to their interests, you are, having a cohesive narrative with their story, the better it's going to be. I mean, I think about the customers that we've implemented who don't have any segmentations and who I coach into their first segments, and the click-through rates really speak through themselves. I've never had a single customer who didn't see a higher click-through rate through any segmentation, whether those are, information we track out of the box through the SDK, or of course more custom information specific to your app. So just wrapping up on that piece, I think it's always important to remember that these are end users whose phones have a lot of information on it. To stand out, you really need to be considerate and thoughtful about what's going into the message personalization, what's going into the segmentation as well. But one thing that's, onboarding 101 really important is pre-permission prompts. So this is we always coach it that, we always coach it that we want it to be a soft pre-permission before the hard iOS prompt. So what this allows you to do is this allows you to control the branding. This allows you to say, before getting iOS wants you to opt into notifications, allow and not allow. This allows you to tell the story as to why. Because if someone's logging into the app, especially if this is a really early barrier for them and they don't understand what value they're going to get from it or why it's coming up, they're way more likely to say no. So what pre-permissions allow you to do is brand it yourself, come up with your own value prop. Like with news teams, I always say emphasize breaking news. What are they going to get with push notifications? And we've seen that it makes for a much better result. The other thing I wanted to emphasize is Android is actually coming out with changes in September. So right now, iOS pre-prompt is pretty, iOS specific because Android, you're kind of naturally opted in and then choose to opt out. But in September, Android is going to follow suit. So if you have been, waiting to do this because, maybe you are a more international mobile base and you have a higher Android user, or you're just more popular with Android or Android only, and you've waited on this, I think it's worth getting ahead of and really thinking about and being considerate about because those rates, if things stay the way they are, those rates are likely going to decrease, and it's just another way to tell your story. A couple of stats here about pre-permission prompts. For iOS, I think, not surprising that people who are able to talk about specifically what they get out of push notifications see a 50% higher opt-in rate. Also, I've always found that it's a little bit of a better onboarding experience when you have, you've been acquired, you've downloaded an app, and you see the brand telling you why the brand wants to reach out to you. I think it's a little less jarring than having the standard iOS prompt. And Android apps as well, some do implement pre-permission prompts. I know it's not talked about as much, but they often see a 15% boost on their own alone now. That's before those changes that are coming out in the future. And users who have opted into push notifications are retained at 2x. This is another point that I think is important to hit home. So during the onboarding process, if this doesn't go seamlessly, you sort of cut yourself off from a channel of retention, re-engagement, personalization, anything else that comes down the line later. So I think that this I mean, if you think about like the upfront cost of acquisition, you finally got them into the app. And if you don't have a good opt-in story, you're going to lose out on opportunities to tell them about new products later, to send a re-engagement campaign. So it's important to think about the other pieces that are cut off, because push permissions are the only way to kind of get someone's attention after it's faded, after that initial download, that initial gameplay. So just wanted to emphasize that of all the other channels, this one is one of the easiest to just click, get right back into the app, have them, finish an onboarding step, things like that.
Cool. Yeah, there's plenty of good examples out in the wild with the pre-permission prompts. It's always that awkward alliteration, but it's always be selling, right? Comes down to what's the value proposition, right? What are you trying to communicate? What's going to be valuable to the user? In our experience, right, we've seen obviously customized messages based on people's behavior really perform very well. Trying different angles, right? You want to meet the user where they're at and give them multiple chances to understand. We're inundated with messages. We're not always going to see that one, so don't give up, right? There's a lot of, even if it's a single value proposition, repeat that over a course of time. Ask the user if they need help, right? I've seen some really great examples in the wild of just, after a week of selling of the value proposition with different messages across email and push, just ask them, hey, you're still listening, you're still getting these messages, do you need help to help move forward? And ask it in different ways as well. And also, I've seen some great examples of asking a provocative question, like, does this actually work, right? So some engaging things, which I don't know if that's clickbaity, but kind of, right, where you kind of see, hey, does this work? And like, yeah, I don't know, and you kind of click through. But there's some really cool things that we've seen out there in the wild.
When Trig mentioned the other day it had worked for him, he was using a meditation app, and they were like, is meditation effective? And he was like, and I clicked it.
Yeah.
For creating a coherent narrative, I think this is just a really important way to not lose users early on. So first, continuity against all touch points. If you have a certain message you're using to acquire users, make sure that that message is reflected in the onboarding, that message is reflected in the emails that they're getting later. I've seen a few examples of some people who are like using Instagram ad targetings to get people into their app and like customizing it for different profiles to try and outreach to like larger groups, but you can kind of see that the value prop changes when it's in the app. So just important to think about your consistent value pitch and making sure that, I've seen some examples of like an email team that's working separately from a push team, and there can sometimes be like different stories and different, journeys to get there. There are some examples of apps that are doing this really well. I think about like Too Good To Go. I think they have some people here right now, but just an example of like they are a mission-oriented group to make sure that they are making sure that good food doesn't go to waste in New York. So it's very clear from like after you purchase, they're like incentivizing. They're like, this is how much you saved, and they give you all these milestones for like you took a car off the road and all of those good things. So continuity for that brand and that message. Because it's really important to make sure you know exactly what you're signing up for. And in terms of channel and funnel, this is just making sure that when you are creating a bunch of different campaigns together, there always needs to be some conversation, higher level, looking at how many people are being reached out to when. So if you have, a push and an email that are both going out 24 hours after something, so why not stagger it? Maybe have the push first, the email second. There are sometimes teams that I've seen haven't been as cohesive with their different outreach channels, and it makes for a weird experience when you're getting different venues at the same time. We usually emphasize that closer to activities, push notifications are better. From the 24-hour period of wanting some strategic event to happen, we usually recommend emails at that point in time. So. Avoiding redundant information capture. This is one that is a personal pet peeve of mine. Anytime you know something about a customer, whether it's their name and when they open up the app again, you're going to say like, welcome back, Sasha. If they have paid for something before, collecting their card information, things like that can really, throw an onboarding off. I had a fintech app where you had to add a credit card, and the metrics for how many people were adding a credit card were just abysmal in the beginning. But they were able to gamify it. They like grade out things that you couldn't use until it's completed. And as soon as you like captured a card, it was captured for good. And they made sure that you could actually capture it using like a camera. So they outsourced to another team, so you could take a picture of the credit card, record that information. So just an example of trying to get some of the work and the like tediousness of onboarding, signups, things like that, away from that. Push notification boosting engagement. So this is a little bit, back to what I said before about how these push notifications are also indicative of the entire journey you're going to have with that person. So it'll be retaining them, at a 3x to 10x. Obviously, that's another big, wide range of a metric, but another example of how important these journeys and campaigns are. I always recommend having journeys in between key milestones, if you can break apart what should happen for the user's journey and when, and kind of looping them in between. That way, you're never repeating information they don't need, but you're being considerate of where they are.
It's always the bigger number that
Yes. We'll go with 10.
It's always the bigger number that it will boost. And a lot of this, I feel, we're talking about best practices. Sometimes it's like the weather, right? Some of it's good, some of it's bad. It's all the context of your use case and where you're coming from. But there's a lot of great tactics, and surprisingly, I don't see this tactic as much in the wild. But I think it's really powerful. Is just thanking users, congratulating them at every point, almost. I mean, not in an obnoxious way, but things that are just after you, sign up, after you, opt in to push, saying thanks. This is also probably some good behavioral psychology behind this, right? Where there's the concept, the endowed progress effect, right? Where you demonstrate to users that they're already halfway down the, onboarding road, even though they've just started. And so users are invested already. And so, psychologically, they're gonna, be more willing to move forward because they see visually that like the progress bar is already there, right? You're getting these messages. It's just a nice little tactic where you're congratulating and even just small little encouragement throughout the process. It's just really great. And of course, it takes some thought. You need some good copyright folks to create this content, but it's a really powerful one, and just simply saying thanks, I think, is really powerful. So we'll hop into a demo after all that to kind of show the One Signal Journeys product in action. So we doing good on time?
Yeah, I think we're going to cut off in like 5 minutes and then do Q&A, if that's okay with you guys.
Cool. So we've reached the lightning round as far as this goes because we
We're
started a little bit late. So just to orient ourselves quickly, so if you log into the One Signal dashboard, you'll notice, and we're going to focus on the Journeys product, but effectively, right, we have some analytics under the dashboard, individual messages, right? So again, push, in-app messages, email, SMS, you're able to bring that together with our Journeys product and orchestrate, and it's a really powerful tool, and we're seeing, pretty wide adoption and some really great stuff. So in this example, we'll just show you a couple examples and I can show you it in action. So in this, you can zoom out and see everything, and we can zoom in to that first node. So when you create a journey, you create an entry criteria and an exit criteria. Here, I'm targeting you. This is kind of a generic app install campaign. So I had, integrated with AppsFlyer or Adjust, so I know where these users came from. I know they're at the start of the funnel, and this is my audience that I'm targeting there. But I'm excluding users that have already converted, and that's a segment that I've created within the dashboard here. And once they do install and opt in to messages, I'm going to wait an hour. You can customize that though, right? And we can follow up, with a transactional email, a transactional push, that nice little congratulations, welcome. You can also wait and tag a user, and that's a way to, in a no-code way, to add data to that user profile. You can do that where they are within the funnel, add any personalized information if you have that in the context of the journey, and it's important for segmentation, personalization down the road. In this example, right, we just wait an hour, and then we send a little learn and earn message, because this is a fictional crypto app. However, we were joking that I think the coins should be going the other way, because we all know how that story is unfolding right now. But you select a template there, and obviously there's things you want to leverage, images, videos, right? Because that catches the eye. And probably minimize the dad humor there, though. But so here, after users, and this really simple example for users that did convert after seeing that really amazing first message, then they go off and they get the congratulations message. But for those users that didn't, we're kind of giving up early here, but this is just really a simple example. We tag them to retarget. So we're going to retarget them with another campaign, right? And then we exit. Now let's hop over to another one, because I also want to illustrate here. This is just an example where we have multiple value propositions, and really why I wanted to highlight this is, right, we're targeting users that we've targeted for, the app event optimization, right? So they've done a specific event, and that's the users from that previous campaign I'm targeting, but I'm not going to target users that are already onboarded. And this is an example where we have multiple messages, kind of that progression of value, right, that we have. And the cool thing is, users that already are onboarded will not receive any of those messages. So you can control that when you set that up. And here down the line, they will wait an hour. If we zoom in a little bit, maybe that's easier. We send that next message, we wait one day. And that's a common pattern I see across a lot of journeys is, you have that, immediate message within, 30 minutes, an hour, and then you wait a day. It's kind of a natural cadence. But the cadence, of course, will be important for where you're coming from and what makes sense for your exact use case. But you can customize that as well. And so here we go down the line with different messages, finishing with help, right? So obviously we can lean on memes when we run out of things to say. But that's something that I thought was pretty cool in a lot of journeys that I've experienced, where users that you present the value proposition, you prevent the value proposition, but in the end is like, hey, do you need help? You're still with us. That's something that I thought was a really thoughtful approach that was really, really, really cool. Now, and we can I can finish here. We'll just just show you in action. So when we create a new journey, this is pretty simple. Now, keep in mind, we'll give it a name. We assume that you have a lot of your data integrated and you have a lot of this information, because that enables what segments you have. But in this example, right, let's say we'll have a value optimization. I have, I spent hundreds of dollars to acquire a whale as a game or some other customer. Right? So I know that this is a really important audience, but that's all based off of data that I'm getting from either my own source, or if I've integrated with Adjust or AppsFlyer, right? So that's, we know that this is the campaign. We have that information. We're going to exclude, in this example, users that already were onboarded. And that's also the segment that I've defined based off of that. Going down here, exit rules, we can do it either, did they move through the entire journey, or did they enter that segment? So here, if they've onboarded, or I've created a generic converted one, we're no longer going to message them. So that's just a convenience. So they may not get any message once they've installed and start down this path, but they may if they've already converted, right? So they're only going to get the relevant messages as a convenience.
You might have to wrap to Q&A, I think.
Wrap to Q&A, and on down the line there. So if you notice, right, I think one thing I did want to call out here is, importantly, right, you can leverage across, all the different channels there. you can tag users within that. So like the retargeting example, right? You want to make sure they're going to follow up with another campaign. And you can leverage, email push. And the efficacy of those channels, I think, will depend on your use case as well. We talked to some customers, right, where they like in the gaming space, where they say, well, email doesn't work. We've tested it. But also, and maybe it doesn't, but maybe they don't have deep links implemented properly, right? There's a whole host of reasons why things may or may not work. And I guess we can take some questions at that, so we can leave it today and appreciate your time.
Well, outside of the Q&A here, we're also at booth 9. We'll be rotating in and out all day, so happy to. I also love hearing about like if you are trying to like break down your user journey, stuff like that. We're always happy to talk about those fun and unique problems. It's always good stuff. But let's take some questions.
For maybe that's on screen here because it's related to sort of SMS. I like the feedback that you gave before about, or the recommendation, which is do a push if it's closer to the event, email, maybe it's a little more feedback, or maybe it's a confirmation or something. SMS, what are your thought process on SMS? Why is it great out there?
Yes, SMS is great out there because it is on our product roadmap. It's coming very soon. VP of product in the back left there, so we can call him out in a minute. But my thoughts on SMS versus push in general. Push is way more affordable, but the click-through rates are lower. So if you have captured someone's phone number for SMS, the read rates, the amount of attention that gets is very high. But the cost to send, and this is like across the board, this is not like a one single thing, the cost to send SMS is a lot higher. So it really depends on the use case. If this is like maybe a really high value purchase, then SMS should definitely be a consideration. But if this is like a gaming company, you want people to come back for spins, do not recommend going and especially with like a gaming company that often has a very fast cadence of how much they want to reach out. But we can also talk offline about your use case and go between the two. But that's usually the difference between the two. I think mobile push, it's way easier to get, it's way less expensive. You kind of have more room to work with, but SMS is very valuable. So something to think about. But we do support SMS, just not in the journeys piece. So we do work through that. Yeah.
Definitely use case specific. There's companies like Attentive that have built a whole business around SMS in particular, where, on retail and there's certain verticals. So I think it's use case specific. In some sense, maybe it's the third rail. You don't want to go there, without really understanding the use case. But.
Yeah.
Speaking of SMS, what are your thoughts about collecting email, SMS during the onboarding? You get to pick, or do you collect all, or how do you make the decision of which information to gather during your onboarding?
This is more my opinion, but I think it ultimately has to be data-driven, right? The concept of making, where you A/B test that. We do have, for example, with our web push opt-ins, we have a little default prompt that asks users to enter their phone or their email at that time. Obviously, I think you need to prompt users of why it would be valuable to do that. I think oftentimes it's transactional, where it's some information paywall where they have to provide that to get something, whether it's marketing material or something. But again, maybe it's unsatisfying answer, but it's use case driven, because I don't think there's any one right time, because sometimes you see people often ask right away, and that's one way. But obviously, when you're providing that information, it may be intrinsic to where people have to provide that, like we go back to a crypto app, you have to know your customer, right, where they have to provide that information, so then they can do the ID verification after the fact. But I guess the answer is follow the data in that.
And there's always two things to balance, because it's like how many hoops do you want them to jump through up front? Because if it's someone who's downloading a game, like, you have to be really frictionless. And I've seen that like companies that have that kind of like fast momentum of something they want to do, and because there are some like relationships that might be a little longer to build when someone's downloading an app, but some of those they like to take out the friction points and sort of space them out a little more, and then prioritize like what channel is most important to capture, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about coaching customers through segmentation? Do you have like a standard best practice of what like segments to create when you're just starting out?
Well, I mean, two thoughts. There's some stuff that the SDK collects out of the box. So there are some things that I will set up with teams while the dev work's being done, where it's like, when a user's last session was, how many sessions someone has. Like, we know that from mobile out of the box. So you can create, like whale users, unexperienced users, people who've spent more time total, good stuff like that. And then other than that, I think it's going back to the first key segments that I would set up are the first key pieces in the journey. Do they need to complete an onboarding? Is there a purchase piece to it? Is there a certain tip-off point of a customer of success? Do they need to go to level 5 in a game? So it's kind of finding those magic points and helping get people there. And I mean, there are some that I think if you're retail and you don't have cart abandonment, that's number one best thing, money on the table. But also we can talk at booth 9 and I can help with whatever your app does.
Yeah, it comes down to what your taxonomy is, right? What are your named events? There are a lot of boilerplate stuff based on engagement, like when were they last engaged, how often, and stuff like that. But that's obviously use case specific. We work with partners like Feature, for example, where they have a really great worksheet that helps you organize your taxonomy if you haven't already done that. Where you just on the acquisition side and in the engagement side, where you kind of get maybe some clear, coherent, consistent naming of your events and items like that. Because once you have that, then you have a strong foundation and it's a lot easier. And then you're typically leveraging either some analytics provider, right? Adobe, Mixpanel, Amplitude, and we work with all of those folks as well that'll come back automatically and feed into your segments.
We're 1 minute over. I don't think we're kicked out of the room for a few minutes. If you guys want to kind of just come up and ask us anything afterwards as well. But thank you guys. Booth 9, see you around.
Thanks for your attention and time.